Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I'm glad to be here with you once again. Total Balanced Life Ministries, uh, Dev Campbell. Listen, I have a very, very special guest, a brother that I'm sure all of you have heard his name. He's someone who has been greatly nationally known and just shared throughout the world. And I'd like to introduce to some, present to others, Pastor Kervance D. Ross. He is the pastor of Internet and Innovations at New Birth Missionary Baptist Church in Lithonia, Georgia, where the senior pastor is Dr. Jamal Bryant. Pastor Ross, we thank you for being with us this evening.
Dr. Campbell, I'm honored, I'm grateful, and I really appreciate the invite and the opportunity, and I'm excited to be here with you on your platform, and I'm an open book. You got my undivided attention, and the platform is yours, and I'm simply following along in the back seat, brother.
Well, listen, I appreciate that. Before we get started, I want to tell everybody, if you can, please so kindly, I had to borrow this, not steal it. I had to borrow this from Pastor Ross. But if you can, everybody that's watching, if you tag 10, then if you text 10, okay, and if you share this with 10 folks, we'll be on our way. So, Pastor Ross, again,
yes,
one of the things that, I'll just share with everybody, before we went live, I was sharing with Pastor Ross that I caught his 15 minutes of Daily Bread a little earlier, a couple of hours ago. He was on, and when I tell you the kingdom pandemic that he was speaking of, I had to literally pause what I was trying to do to focus on what he was saying, because it was amazing. It was amazing. Wow. But if you can, Pastor Ross, before we dive into that, tell the people who you are and give a little bit about your background, because I'm sure, most folks, they became aware of who you were once you hit, New Birth. And that was something that was, widely spread. But we know that there was a Pastor Ross before the days of New Birth. So if you can just share with us a little bit about your background.
Again, man, I'm excited to be here with you. I think this is an amazing thing that you have going on and that you're doing. And who better to help galvanize voices in crisis than you? So thank you for this opportunity. I am Kervance Ross. I go by the Kingmaker, and it is my purpose, my duty, and my call in life to touch at least 1 billion people before I die, and help them obtain their optimum level of purpose, greatness, and success. With that being the case, over the last 13 years, I operate in marketplace, ministry, and in mainstream. And in the marketplace, I own KDR Consulting, a strategic and development and marketing firm based out of Atlanta, Georgia. We cover actually all of the 7 kingdoms, even before I knew that was what we were doing. The major corporations, small business, government, nonprofit, faith-based, education, entertainment, and have been doing that all across the width and breadth of the country, going on 14 years now. I'm a published author, preacher of the gospel, a father, a husband, and a current PhD candidate in the area of organizational leadership and change, and pastoring in the most unique role in the last 50 years of church history, pastor of Internet and Innovation at the greatest church on the planet, New Birth Missionary Baptist Church, senior pastor, Dr. Jamal Bryant. So that's a little about me in a nutshell, sir.
And listen, that little bit in a nutshell was, so full. Oftentimes, and I'll say this for myself, coming up in a church background, church family, us being of somewhere within the same generational age, It was not widely pushed too much that I've seen, where it was, talking about outside of the four walls of the church in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm.
It was only referring to outreach.
Yeah.
On Saturdays, you go out there, you pass out tracts. At the church Friday night or Saturday, y'all may have the spaghetti dinners, the chicken dinners.
Yeah.
But that was your way to lure people to church Sunday morning,
Right.
and it didn't go past that. So, with hearing, like you said, with you touching on the seven kingdoms,
Yes, sir.
and I'm familiar with that terminology because, again, I heard your midday bread that you invited me to, but that seven kingdoms, it allows the church to expand the mindset outside of the four walls where we can actually be impactful in the world.
Yes, sir.
The way we should. Just on average, most people that live within the 5 mile vicinity of a church, you'll get a fraction of those who come to the church building. But for the other 2/3 that do not come to the church building, what about them? So what you're talking about is something so impactful. And if you can just break that down a little bit, as far as the marketplace and the seven kingdoms.
So you reminded me of a story that I heard years ago about a church in a community, and had been doing massive outreach as they thought, in the way that they thought was most impactful. And one day, the church caught on fire, and a man from down the street was seen with his water hose and making sure that he was trying to govern and manage the fire of the church.
Yes.
And the fire department came, we got the fire under control, and the pastor asked who was the reason that we were able to save our church. The fireman said it was a man across the street. He said, is he a member? He said, I don't know. You can go meet him. He gave him his telephone number, his direct address. And when he gets over to the man's house, the pastor knocks on the door and he says, I heard you were impactful in saving my church. He said, yes. He said, are you a member? He said, no, I've never gone to your church. So we've been here for years. How long have you been here? He said, I grew up here all my life. He said, well, why were you so avid to show up while the church was on fire and not helping me while the church has not been ablaze? He said, because if I caught you all on fire, I probably would show up. But unfortunately, this moment has never seen before. So I wanted to help and rush to the rescue as best I could.
Wow.
And with that reality, many of us are in a moment where people who've been in our neighborhood, if we properly handle social media, will run to the blaze. But they've never seen us on fire. They've seen us operate under a structured template.
Yes.
They've seen us do stuff traditionally, but they've never seen us on fire for our call. Wow. And this social media platform through the seven kingdoms will force us to realize that there are more ways for us to catch on fire than just having church on Sunday morning. Yes. And sometimes we can't reach the people because we don't understand the message that we were designed to give from the man on high. So the man on high has organized the book for all of us to stay on fire all the time. The yes. challenge is we only see this book from a lens of church. And because our perspective is jaded, we have kind of marginalized a lot of the message of the Bible because we don't see the totality of this perspective God was writing from.
Yes.
And when you start to realize that 67% of the people that we preach about in the Bible are not preachers, they are marketplace masters. And within that, when you understand that you're often listening to a voice of not a churchgoer, but a marketplace master, you will then understand the context of the writing. When I understand that David is a military general, and when he starts talking in certain passages, we will understand that when he says, lift up your head, O ye gates, and be ye lifted up, ye everlasting doors, he's making the connotation as a military leader that gates are where business was going on.
Yes.
Gates are where the commerce of the city was going on. So he's not talking about a glorious moment in the hereafter. When you understand that there is a marketplace mindset in the Bible, you'll quickly realize he's saying, lift up all of the marketplace, all of the businesses, lift up your heads, all of education, all of entertainment, because the King of Glory has allowed me to come in.
Yes.
So when we now to break this kingdom concept down, you understand that you have government, you have church, you have family, you have finance, you have entertainment, you have media, and you have education. These are 7, what I would call slices of a pie. And if I found out, Deborah, that your favorite pie was New York cheesecake, and I got you one from New York, sliced it up into 7 slices, fed you 1 slice and threw the other 6 slices away, you probably want to cut my head off. And that's how the world feels about us, simply because we only see through the church lens, and we throw them away and ask them to come to the table to eat something that is not on the menu that they like.
Wow.
So when you understand these 7 kingdoms, you now realize that if we're only operating in the church space when less than 1% of society considers themselves Christian, there is the 99 out there that we never reach. And isn't that one of the greatest parables in the Bible? But the church operates in the reverse. We focus on the 1 and we leave the 99. So when you understand the kingdom mindset, it shifts how you reach people, how you talk to them, and how you see through this lens that God is giving you to interpret the Bible.
Well, let me say that I do love New York cheesecake. And later on, once this lockdown is over with, we'll have to go to Junior's.
I've been there.
And I'll treat you to a slice of Junior's cheesecake. And when I come to Atlanta, we can go get a slice of red velvet.
Hey, man, you got a deal. Let's seal that and ride with it. No questions asked.
We're going to seal that and sanctify it.
Yes, sir.
But I'm overwhelmed because, again, I heard, your segment earlier, and when you were talking about the 7 kingdoms, and like you said, with the slice of pie, most of the time for years, the church has only operated with what was spiritual and what was right there as far as the church. And I would feel safe to say their particular denomination. Yep. So you had where a lot of Kojic only really dealt with Kojic, the apostolic only with apostolic, so on and so forth. And like you said, when it comes to the other areas, when it comes to education, when it comes to entertainment, when it comes to finance, we're missing out on very pivotal areas wherein we could introduce Christ in a different perspective, instead of people feeling like because you're in ministry or you're spiritual, you're just going to tell me I'm going to hell. Okay. Mm-hmm. You want to throw oil around. You want to judge how I dress. You want to judge my lifestyle. And you don't want to, interject Christ from the way you live, from a lifestyle point of view. And I've often said to some preachers, I said, it's funny how with Jesus being who he was, when you look at the men that he selected to be what would be considered his inner circle, if you look at it, they were all prominent people in what we would call the marketplace. Okay, you had someone in finance, you had someone in the field of medicine, you had people that had key positions that was outside of the church, but they were prominent, they were known, and they were somebody who, okay, you know what? This is not anybody to overlook. This is somebody of some type of status. So it wasn't wherein, and I don't, want to get in trouble, but I'm just saying it wasn't, Jesus rolling with a board of bishops, or he rolling with everybody that were high priests. He rolled with common men who were relevant to their communities and in the marketplace, wherein now they're more of an asset.
Yes.
And that's what, this current, I would say, realm of kingdom has to become, and we have to develop that into our new way of living. because the old way that we once lived, we'll never live that way again.
Right.
And you know, let's be honest, with this global pandemic, you know, that we're experiencing, it will never go back to the way it was.
Correct.
And just to give, you know, a spiritual reference, when the children of Israel left Egypt, they never returned.
Mm-hmm.
So our Egypt was yesterday. Okay, we are now in a place to prepare for our promised land. Now, how that promised land looks, you know, and how we're going to, you know, go in it and actually live, it depends on what we do now as far as preparation.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm so glad that you brought that out, because for years, again, you know, you had a lot of folks in church as far as leaders that were somewhat stuck, and they were
Yep.
somewhat with blinders on like racehorses, and they only saw their denomination in the four walls of the church, and they weren't the assets to the community that they needed to be.
Agreed.
Now, with that, you talked a little bit about being an author. And I'm telling you now, I let me know what I need to do to get an autographed copy of your material, because it's not often that you have folks that are anointed by God but can translate life and mix that with spiritual principles. And
Yes,
now you
sir.
have a product that is not the Bible, but it can feed your soul, your mind, as well as your spirit all in one.
Yes.
So it's not
Yes.
everybody that can do what God has gifted you to do. Let's talk about your book. Let's talk about your book. I looked a little bit and I said, okay, you know, I went on Kindle and I said, you know what? Just the title alone, I said that can be a series all by itself. All right. But the book that you wrote, How to Change the Mind of a Mediocre Man.
Yes, sir.
And I took that personally because, number one, being a man, and number two, often hearing falsehoods related to men, as far as how mediocre we are,
Mm-hmm.
how simplified we are. And a lot of times that transfers over to the lack of proper respect, in a sense wherein there was nothing that God made that was junk.
Mm-hmm.
There was nothing that God created that was of no significance. So for God to say, let us make man in our likeness and our image, God thought enough of us to create us. So for that
Mm-hmm.
book, and for number one, it to draw people as far as changing the mind of a mediocre man. So wherein we look at ourselves differently before we can expect the world to look at us. So let's talk a little bit about what gave you the initiative, or what gave you the unction to write that book.
That was my first book. I wrote it over 14 years ago now. And the book was a conversation that was actually for women, seeing that when you think about writing a book, your target market, seeing that 84% of people who purchase books are women, has to always be towards women. If there's a change you want to make in men, I have found the best way to get a man to change is have a woman influence him to do so. So the book
Mm,
was directed to the reality that there are three levels of this man dynamic. You have a man that you've ever been fathered by, if you've ever been in a relationship with a man, if you've been akin to a man, or you know a man in your life, this book was for you. Man was looking at manhood from the standpoint of who we are as men, number one.
mhm.
Secondly, looking at us as mankind, both men and women. And then looking at the man motivator. So when I say a man motivator, everybody has the propensity to be great at one thing and be mediocre everywhere else.
Yes.
That's because many of us operate in our gifts and not in our purpose. So when you're doing that, you can literally win and still be outside of your purpose. Just because you're winning above average, the term above average literally means to be on top of the bottom. So
Okay.
when you look at that dynamic, many of us are on top of our bottom. We have not made any adjustments outside of our ego to focus on our purpose and our call. So this message was to show us how to become more balanced, where we're not top heavy, how to understand your purpose, even before I realized that's what the case was, how to focus on creating balance in your family, in your business, and in your spiritual life. And then having the dialogue so that women stop the opportunity to incapacitate strong men by ultimately making them weak, never calling them to the cuff. And
Wow.
realizing that the second piece of this, which really is the first, is that you could blame any societal dynamic of what men do wrong on women. And the reason I said that is because if women made us not do it, we would change immediately. All of us get dressed up just because we know women are out there. We work hard because we want to impress a woman.
Mm-hmm.
We work to keep our name credible because we don't want to let down a woman.
Mm-hmm.
And the moment that women allow us to be mediocre is the moment that we stop caring. So the conversation had a circular dynamic, and that was the impetus behind the book.
And I mean, that right there is so very impactful, because a lot of times, in conversation, growing up in a household with my sisters, my brother was older, so he went to the Marine Corps. So growing up in a household with women, there was somewhat of a universal thought. And with a lot of what you just said, with just trying to do things to get the acceptance, or to please the women that, you're in contact with. I remember one of my biggest motivators was to get some type of praise from my sisters growing up. So I did things that I knew that they liked, because then they would turn around and praise me. So with that type of thought train, when you get older and you're dating and you get married, like you said, we get dressed up, we work hard. A lot of our accomplishments that we accomplish as men is not primarily for us first, it's for those women in our lives. And as we know, a lot of the
And
things
that's,
women say do control the narrative of what we do.
well, that was a major point in the book where I started to realize that many of us don't realize or recognize what men value. So the first thing we have to value by default is the fact that men want the approval of other men.
Mm-hmm.
They want the acceptance of other women.
Mm-hmm.
So when you realize that manhood is about going through levels of approval by
Yeah.
other men. When Jesus is being baptized in the River Jordan and John the Baptist has just finished the process, it says that the Spirit, like a dove, lighted on his shoulders and the heavens opened up, and his father says, "This is my beloved son, who I am well pleased." He's approved him.
Yes.
Women are our acceptors. That's why you offer your telephone number. You want to marry her and take care of the bill. That you offering something, and all you need for her to do is accept your offer. But unfortunately, because we become mediocre and had horrible templates, we have switched the roles, and we now want our brothers to accept us and women to approve us.
Wow.
And when that starts to happen, you force women to try to be men, and you force men to have to act like women. And if that's not clear, we will minimize our relationships, and we will fracture our dating compartments of who we are as men and women, and create mediocrity, and lessen our opportunity to optimize who we've been called to be.
Wow. That right there is again, very impactful and very true. And we've seen examples of that, which is the reason why in the church realm, as far as believers, the divorce rate, it seems like year after year increases, and a lot of it, I think, because of wrong placement as far as the proper roles, which God intended, and miscommunication. Like you said, if you're now wanting approval, and instead of it being vice versa, we need to understand what needs to take place in the proper perspective.
Yes, sir.
Just like the analogy that you gave earlier when I was listening to you, and you talked about if you went on the beach and you wrote the number 6, if the other pastor came from the opposite direction, it would look like a 9. The perspective of how we see things because of the improper template can cause a lot of misdirection. And of course, with misdirection, you have things that are out of place, they're out of line, and you cannot expect peace out of turmoil.
Yep.
You cannot expect that. So that is dynamic. Let me ask you this question. Being in the time that we're in now, how has pastoring, from your perspective, been affected from how things were to the adjustment that, from a leadership point of view, you need to make now?
Well, one of the realities that pastors have to understand that whatever model they use before he doesn't work for where we're going. It's not just about you leading out front. It's about you leading within. We've got to break our rules, because what seminary taught us about church structure and polity, what it focused on about sermon building, it's nothing seminary taught is preparing you for leadership in the here and now.
Absolutely.
So you literally got to go back and make the adjustment. It is the book that I read earlier, or at the end of last year, called Canoeing the Mountains. Okay. And in Canoeing the Mountains, it puts you in a position where you understand that Lewis and Clark had been called by a president of the United States at that time to go and try to find the proper waterway to the Pacific Ocean. And they were right after the Louisiana Purchase. This would change the revenue and economy of the United States. All they knew was what was on the East Coast. And when they climbed some mountains on the East Coast, they could see the waterways.
Yes.
And what had happened is people who had never gone west had made assumptions about what would happen if you went after the Pacific Ocean, simply because of their experience on the East.
Okay.
So when Lewis and Clark get out there, they get over the mountains, they got these canoes on their backs, and they are totally ready to see the Pacific Ocean. And when they climb the first mountain, all they can see, for as far as their eyes can obtain, are more mountains. They just realized and discovered the Rocky Mountains. Wow. So they had to answer the question, do we throw away the canoes, or do we break up the canoes and use the wood to canoe the mountains? Wow. And in this day and time, pastoring has to force us to make the decision that we knew how to canoe Sunday morning. We knew how to canoe deacons. We knew how to canoe tricky trustees. We knew how to canoe ugly ushers. We knew how to canoe at anniversary, and we knew how to canoe circumstances and Easter. But now we have mountains in front of us and not more water.
Yes.
And we've got to decide, are we going to get upset and throw away the canoe, or are we going to break it up and learn how to canoe the mountains? And that's the difference in pastoring in this season, because people need a today word. You can't repackage this word. Yes. On top of that, they need authenticity, realizing that nobody thought that Donald Trump was smarter than Hillary Clinton, but yes, everybody thought he was more believable. And I do not want to be the church and have the church on trial and possibly going to jail for false advertisement because they're not authentic. And in this moment, pastoring forces you to use your old tools in a different way so that you can reach people that would never come your way. So with that, it forces us to pastor drastically different today than it would have this time last year.
And you made the reference of taking your old tools and using them differently. And that right there is impactful in a sense wherein most people would say, I've had this tool for 10 years now. All right. And I need to go and get a new tool. And we know as time goes on, there's things that become, you know, out of, production. So it's not that the tools are bad. It's just you have to find a different way to use them. Evangelism will always be a great tool for the body of Christ, but the way you evangelized 20 years ago, you can't do that now because again, it's a different season. You're dealing with different people. My stepfather, he was a very serious fisherman, and I remember the times where he would be preparing to go out 3, 4 in the morning, at different times, and he would tell me the different fish that he was going after. And every time he went out, I noticed he would have a different bait and he would have different techniques that he used with different baits to get different fish. Why? Because, you can't catch whiting the same way you might need to catch bass. Yes, they're both fish, but you use different, bait and you use different techniques. And not only that, but you had some fish that were freshwater. You had some fish that, you went out and it was just a difference. And it's being open-minded and being teachable. Wherein, like you said, okay, if you're in the mountain, of course you're not going to canoe the mountain because that's not what that tool was meant for. But you can break up the canoe and you can still use that as a tool to help you navigate through the mountain. And who knows what other tools are going to be when you reach water, but at least you got through the mountain instead of being stuck. And that's one of the prayers just universally. I know not just myself, but a lot of pastors are praying for the open mind and the wisdom on how to canoe through what considers to be mountainous terrain, because nobody expected for there to be this type of season where you're on lockdown. I've been telling people for the past, 2 or so months that it seemed that if God paused time in a sense, and he paused time with the retrospect of, I've never seen a time, and I've known plenty of other people, I've never seen a time where it seemed as if the earth has shut down, and it allows those who were in great position of power to somewhat come to a halt, but it allows those who would be considered the little man to somewhat get things in order, things in proper perspective, and to somewhat come up to a greater level in their lives. There's people now taking advantage of online education, greater now than before. Last year, this time, people, when it comes to finance, are working on their finances, building themselves up. Even just something as simple as the family dynamic, going back to the original ministry. Before there was church building or denomination, it was family. So now instead of mom and dad, the hustle and bustle of, 60, 70, 80 hours a week, going to commuting and work and, I have to be this provider. Now you have that time allotted back to you. So it's no longer, I don't see my kids unless I check on them at night, when they're already in the bed and I'm up at the crack of dawn before they get up for school. So, you have no longer, relationship. So now in this time, in this season, it's allowed folks to come back to what I look at as the basics. The basics as far as the beginning, the family, the foundation. Your job, your career wasn't the foundation.
Yeah. And I would even challenge that reality that it's not so much that the tools have to remain the same. It's the implementation of the tools that change.
Okay.
As you were talking about, evangelism is only good if we use the tool of evangelism in the target that we're trying to reach. I cannot, no matter how much I want to evangelize Christ, walk into a meeting at any major city or municipality speaking in tongues as we talk about it in church.
Yes.
Yet I've got to make sure that I can speak in the tongues that allow them to understand based off of my purpose
Yes.
where they need to go in a way that they can't speak it on their own. But within that, it then forces us to definitely realize that some of our stuff needs to be broken up because we could not fathom the world standing still as long as it has. And the challenge is we have not fathomed that the church has been standing still the whole time and we thought it was moving.
Wow.
Because of this reality that the world has been shifting culturally the whole time. Facebook didn't get here in January. YouTube didn't show up in February. Online opportunities did not get here in March. But the church is responding as though this stuff just showed up when COVID showed up.
Yes.
And it's forcing us to open our eyes and realize the tools that we ignored, we should have been picking up, while the tools that we were carrying should have been already broken up. And we could have been further down towards the Pacific Ocean of our purpose than we are just standing on these rocky mountains in times when the world needs us.
Wow. Wow. So true. So true. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to hold Pastor Ross too much longer. If you have questions, please send in your questions. Shoot them to me so I can ask Pastor Ross. You being an author, you being a speaker, what does your future over the next 12 months? If you can let us, peek a little bit into that. What does that look like for you?
Well, as a faith-based futurist, a pastor that looks at life through an innovative and digital lens, the next 12 months already have me focused right now on 2021 all the way through the end of that year. Why? Because most of the stuff that we are currently dealing with in my manifesto to come to New Birth, many of these things were in the month-to-month process. Yes. And not knowing that God was going to do what he's doing. So because of the fact that we may have to adjust and move stuff around, means that I have to now start forecasting for the next year. Because to be a futurist, you cannot keep looking at today. You've got to look at where the annals of tomorrow will come from. So as a futurist, you're always looking forward. Now that we realize that people have finally caught up to the fact that you need social media, you need to have more than a website and a logo. You need to be impactful to more people than your cultural connect. So the people that you can connect with, you can often con. And when you have to be in a position where you got to open up your space, you now got to be able to be authentic and reach people you've never connected with. So while we're looking at that reality, I've got to now plan for leadership, plan for seminars that are digital, plan to be able to write this out so people can now implement the stuff that I've already put into place that God has gifted me to develop at New Birth, helping them understand how to bring the right people to the table once they get comfortable beyond the fear that we are just going to wait till we can go back. So I have to now prepare people to know that once they embrace it, this is how you implement it. And you've got to be able to do it within your context. So I'm already writing a book for the end of the year. I've already written several developmental constructs around futurism, around ministry development in the 21st century and beyond, and focused on how we can even shift some of our paradigms about technological devices and concepts that we already have and make people think about it drastically different, because in the last 4 months, everything has changed.
Yes. Gotcha. Also being a futurist, or what some would say a visionary, with the past 4 months, with the foundation that has been laid for that pastor, for that leader who might not be into technology, may not understand it, may not be able to maneuver through it like, some folks who, this is what their area of expertise is. What advice would you give that pastor regarding their ministry and the future of it?
I think we've got to change what our knots look like because of the fact that we focus on what we are so not into that it marginalizes us to into what God is into. When we're talking about I'm not in technology, I'm sure you don't have a flip phone. I'm sure you're not typing up your messages on a typewriter. I'm sure that you have not driven around in a car with no navigation. You know how many people were in the space where when they start putting navigation and systems in the car, I'm not into that. That's too much. I can just use my map. I've been down this road a million times.
Mm-hmm.
Now you cannot fathom a car without a navigation system. We've got to be able to adjust to the spiritual the same way we adjust to the secular. You went from wide leg pants, at least most of us have gone from wide leg pants to slimmer fit pants. You went from 8-button suits to a single breasted suit. You went from bell bottoms to straight legs. But some kind of way we as ministry leaders cannot change from one way to the next. We have become married to a style.
Yes.
So the first thing I would challenge pastors to do is force yourself to be uncomfortable. Number 2, hire people who are credible, smarter, and will be comfortable challenging you in what you don't know. And then number 3, I would expand us to give credit to younger generations while giving credence to older generations. Why is that the case? Because we have demonized a particular sect of young people and we have crippled a particular sector of older people. I said it in the interview yesterday, all old people are not reading encyclopedias and all young people aren't selling drugs.
Yes.
So within that dynamic, my wife's grandmother is on Facebook. She's 77 years old. She's probably watching me right now. She is on Facebook more than any young person I know. And we just taught her how to do it 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
So now she's gotten it and now she can't put it down.
Yeah.
On top of that, you got young people who we keep trying to say, don't go to church, don't like long meter hymns, don't like anything old school. And it's not that they don't like it, but when they like it, you keep telling them what they don't like. Mm-hmm. So they just don't come your way. We've got to give credence to that side, give credibility to the other side, bring them together and allow them to change what we're uncomfortable with. Just those 3 basics will help us navigate this divide and create the harmony we're all looking for.
And that's a wonderful thing, like you say, creating the harmony, and it allows both to feel validation. You're already writing your next book. Can you give us a idea of what that would be?
Yeah, it's going to be in the space of innovation and internet.
Okay.
That's the most I can give you on that one.
Okay.
What I will do is take time to have you go purchase the most recent books, Leadership for Life, and my most current book, The Business in the Bible. Right now, those are what I definitely direct people to use to challenge, adjust, and grow their leadership, and to understand the voice, the perspectives, and the platforms of the people that we're trying to reach, even in this pandemic. And you can get it on our website at kingmakersclub.com, thekingmakersclub.com. They have both of those books right there, and they'll get them out to you right away.
Well, we look forward for all of you who don't have those books, please get it. As you heard just, a few moments that we've taken with Pastor Ross, just the insightful information that he was able to download, for us. I'm sure there's plenty more in his book, and the one that's going to be coming out dealing in the realm of internet and innovation. Pastor Ross, again, man to man, brother to brother, servant to servant, I thank you so much for taking out time out of your schedule. Again, for the wonderful things that yourself and Dr. Bryant are doing down there in the state of Georgia. It is definitely impacting and encouraging, a lot of us leaders and a lot of us people, throughout the country. So, keep doing what you're doing. There definitely is a need, a purpose, for the right type of template. So
Yes,
we
sir.
thank you for stepping up to the plate and being that template. Again, this will not be the last time. We will talk again. I am open to that big brother mentorship type, especially like you said with the whole being futurist.
Yes, sir.
That is a place of for someone like myself a little uncomfortable.
Yes, sir.
Because it's kind of comforting. Okay, I know, basically the next 30 days, 60 days, maybe even, a few months, but, already thinking for the next, projected year, that may be uncomfortable, but stretching beyond your comfort, we understand is very pivotal. So again, thank you for the encouragement, the insightfulness, the challenge to grow beyond where we're at. Um, I will get those books. I will definitely look forward to any time that you're definitely in anywhere in the vicinity, or if I just need to travel down to the Metro Atlanta area to catch one of your seminars or anything like that, I definitely will. Like I said, when I come down there, it'll be the red velvet, and anywhere in the New York area, we're gonna go to Junior.
Hey, man, Dr. Campbell, I appreciate you. I'm here for you any way I can be. Thank you for what you're doing for the kingdom, the exposure, the insightfulness, and the leadership. I'm praying that God is richly and will continue to richly bless you, your ministry, and your vision, even in crisis, that you will win on an optimum level. And to everybody who is tuned in, thank you for allowing me to share my voice on a Friday night. I pray that you stay safe. I pray that you realize your purpose even in this pandemic, and that God changes a crisis into an opportunity for you to change the world on his behalf. I love you, sir. Anytime you need me, feel free to give me a call, and thank you again.
Dr. Ross, I love you as well. And we pray blessings, continued success, and favor as you go about doing the things of the kingdom and representing Jesus Christ in the magnificent way that you're doing. So, again, my brothers and my sisters, ladies and gentlemen, this is Pastor Kervance Ross. Please make sure you go to the Kingsman Club, get those books, get that information. If he's anywhere in your area doing any type of seminars, speaking, or whatever, you have to go check him out so you can get the spiritual download as well as the natural download that will benefit your life and bless you greatly. Pastor Ross, once again, we thank you. I love
Thank
you,
you.
my brother. We will be in touch again. God bless you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.